Shukriya. Good afternoon to you all. Assalamu alaikum. Rather late, and one of the worst punishments which can happen to people is to keep them hungry. I'm partly responsible. I own up the responsibility. I'm sorry that you have to be hungry for such a long time, but also remember I'm with you. Okay, fine. It's a privilege to be here. I have been here a couple of times earlier because we lived, myself and my wife, we lived in Tezpur for 4 long years. And at that time I have visited this place, met some of these dignitaries who are there with me, and all of them I have had a very good relationship over a period of time. Sometimes we have met, sometimes we haven't, but I have known them for quite a long time. Azad Sahab, Islam Sahab, and then my long-ranging friend, Professor Guragwar. When I joined the Tezpur University, he was there as the registrar and he welcomed me there. And prior to joining the university, I was on the board of management, and he was so nice to me from those days onwards. We have maintained a very, very long kind of relationship. So it's great that we recall that. And for me, it's nostalgic coming back to Assam. Half a chance I come back to Assam from wherever I am. Presently, we live in Chennai, but I have an affiliation with an institute in Hyderabad. But we keep traveling here and there. But then every time I get a chance, I would love to come back to Assam. It's all because of the beautiful people and the nice people who are here, and also the kind of work these people have been doing. There are very few parallels in the country in terms of the kind of work which is being done. It's not just education, it's an all-round kind of a thing which is happening right from grassroots. When you take up school education to the highest level of education, and besides that on health and the emergencies which happen in Assam, and the government of India, the government of Assam seems to have just abdicated the responsibility when it comes to something like flooding. They just don't know what to do. It's a kind of a band-aid situation. Whenever there is an injury, something that happens and the band-aid is brought and you put in the band-aid there. So that's the kind of thing happening. I'm not sure, I'm not somebody who is very good in environmentalism who can give a kind of a solution. But I am sure there are places where flooding happens and people have dealt with it effectively. So Ajmal Foundation is involved every year in the relief and rehabilitation of the things which are happening, and therefore it's not the educational thing, but the things which happen at the grassroots level in terms of developing kids from the lowest level. And you saw the kind of thing, responsibilities which have been taken. They have been taken, and that has been a passion for me right from my childhood. When I was born, the Education Minister of India was Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. And it was just a kind of a coincidence that for some reason my father was a fan and he followed everything which Maulana Azad was doing. And for some reason there was another thing which he shared. As a government official, when partition happened in 1947, most of the government officials had an option to go to Pakistan. And my father did opt for that. Otherwise, I don't think I would have had the benefit of talking to you. But the reason my father didn't take up, among other reasons, was Maulana Azad had declined all the kinds of things which were given, including what the Muslim League was doing for them. He stayed a constant and uncontradictory person of Congress, and therefore there was no way he could go. And he was criticized by the Muslim League, and other people criticized him. Generally, many Muslims criticized Maulana Azad for not opting to go to Pakistan. But then he had taken a fundamental kind of a thing whereby he said that I was not born here, but I am going to die here. And that's what thing. And for some reason, my father had taken to that kind of a position which he had, and therefore he had refused. Some of the relatives did go to Pakistan, and some of them came back. Some of them stayed. That's a different matter altogether. But the reason why I have a name like Kalam is because of Maulana Azad and nothing else. And it has been, my task to an extent has been reduced by some of the speakers before me, and also the shadow thing that you had done on Maulana Azad, because some of the facets of his life have been highlighted already by people, and also my good friend Alok Brugaya has also done that by pointing out a few things. So, as all of you know, Azad's father was Maulana Khairuddin, and he was a Bengali Muslim of Afghan origin. He was of an Afghan origin, but then he became a Bengali Muslim in the sense that when Maulana Azad was 2 years old, was born in Mecca, they migrated, as has been pointed out. And many of you may not know, because Maulana Azad was born in Mecca, he was also known as Ahmad Makkabi, which not many people knew about. Ahmad Makkabi was one of the things that was. So the family settled down in Calcutta in 1890, and as it has been pointed out earlier, Maulana Azad died in 1958 and is buried at the Jama Masjid as he wanted to sacrifice his life in India. He is born in Jama Masjid. I mean, he has been resting to the Jama Masjid in Delhi. Now, the full name, as it is taken officially, was Abul Kalam Ghulam Mohiuddin Ahmad bin Khairuddin Al-Husseini. And then he took up the title later as Azad, which means free, and that in Urdu you call as a takhallus. When there are people who are people who write poetry or prose or whatever, many of them adopt what is known as a takhallus. For instance, you had Sahir, who was Ludhanvi. Kaifi Azmi was there, so he had adopted Azmi kind of thing. So most of the poets and writers do adopt a kind of a takhallus. And here the takhallus of Maulana Azad was, Maulana was Azad. And Maulana is a term that you use about a learned man. We also have, for instance, today we have not had the good fortune, but I have had the good fortune earlier of meeting Maulana Badruddin Ajmal Sahab Ali. So Maulana is the term that you use when you talk about somebody who's a learned person. So Azad was homeschooled, and he was homeschooled and he was a self-taught person. He never went to school, but then he had fluency in Arabic as the first language because the family spoke Arabic at home. And then he began to master several other languages. Bangla was almost like a second language to him, then Hindustani or Urdu, and then Farsi and English. So, not having gone to school to adapt and then get these kind of things was something. And then as things happened at that time, during the time then when he was growing up, the early 1900s, he was only 13 years old when he was married to Zulaikha Begum. And the bride probably was 1 or 2 years younger to him. And therefore, after that, in spite of the fact that he was married, he kept that as one of the things in his life, but then he pursued so many different things, everything leading towards independence of India. So he established an Urdu weekly newspaper in 1912 called Al-Hilal, and it was published from Calcutta. And he openly attacked the imperialist British government which was there in the country. And then he started talking about the kind of exploitation which was happening to the people of India. And then the exploration which common people could do in order to withstand the kind of exploitation which the imperialist government was doing. And as could be expected, because he was talking about Indian nationalism, and the publications were aimed at encouraging young Muslims to fight for independence. When the First World War was happening, the British stiffened in censorship. Because the World War was happening, they wanted India's support, and they didn't want any contradictory views to come up, and therefore the censorship which was already there, they brought in more restrictions on that. And this affected the political activity of Maulana Azad. So Al-Halal was consequently banned in 1914 under what the British had as the Press Act. And after that, he started a new journal called Al-Balah, which was also banned in 1916. And the Defense of India regulations were brought in. And the government of Bombay, the Bombay Presidency, United Provinces, Punjab and Delhi prohibited his entry. He was not allowed to go to any of these places, and therefore he was moved to Ranchi, where he was put in jail. This was from 1916 to about 1920, about 4 years he had to be in Ranchi. Now the most interesting thing for now, it's always been a record in India, at the age of 35, Maulana Azad became the youngest ever national president of the Congress's president. Nobody has broken the record so far. At the age of 35, he was the president of the Congress at that time. Now, while this was happening, the independence movement was also, not the independence movement, partition movement was also happening. So there was a kind of a pitched kind of rivalry of some sort between Jinnah and Maulana Azad. Jinnah had asked, Jinnah was quite critical. He had a completely different kind of personality. He had the ambition to become the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and therefore, in order not to get support, because if Azad was not supporting Jinnah, it also meant a huge section of Muslims in India who were not supporting Jinnah and his ideology. And therefore, Jinnah, one of the criticisms he used was, he called Azad the Congress show boy. He said, you may be dropped or you may not be taken seriously, but you are taking Congress very seriously. You are just a show boy for the Congress. This was what he said. And the Muslim League politicians had accused Azad by saying that culturally and politically, the Hindus will dominate the Muslims if the Muslims decide to stay back in India. Whether it's happening today or not is a different question, but at that time the Muslim League had a kind of a vision whereby Jinnah and the others said that the Muslims of India will be politically and culturally dominated by the Hindus, and that was one of the justifications that they're giving for having Pakistan and asking for partition. Now, but Azad continued to have strong faith in Hindu-Muslim unity. He could not waver from that. He never took any kind of stand whereby he would favor the Muslims or go unnecessarily, entirely opposite against the Hindus. He didn't do that. And at one point, I'm going to read a quotation from one of his writings. Azad had said, I'm proud of being an Indian. I'm a part of the indivisible unity that is Indian nationality. I am indispensable to this noble edifice, and without me, this splendid structure is incomplete. It was total faith in India for him. I am an essential element which has gone to build India. I can never surrender this claim. Now this was something which was espousing, not just that he personally believed in it. He always said that this is what I am for, Hindu-Muslim unity. I am part of India and I have taken India as my home. I am going to India. Now some of the people I think have already highlighted and told you that many educational institutions which are thriving today did not happen in the last 10 or 12 or 14 years. They have a long history, and that history goes back to the time of Maulana Azad. In 1920, Maulana Azad was part of the foundation committee which established the Jamia Millia Islamia. And Jamia Millia Islamia was not established in Delhi, it was established in Aligarh. And subsequently, it was moved to Delhi in 1934. So Maulana Azad had a very strong kind of contribution to make to the Jamia Millia Islamia's establishment, first in Aligarh and then moving into Delhi. After independence, he became the Minister of Education, as most of you know. At that time, the ministry was known as Ministry of Education, Natural Resources and Scientific Research. This was the nomenclature which was there. Natural resources and scientific research were part of the Ministry of Education, and Maulana Azad was heading that. In 1952, it was decided that all the affairs of what was happening in colleges and universities in India should come under one single body. And that single body was known at that time as, and continues to be known today as, the University Grants Commission. So in 1952, that was established, and on 28th of December 1953, UGC, or the University Grants Commission, was born. And there was a statutory kind of an organization of the Government of India by an Act of Parliament in 1956, which justified the existence and continuation of UGC, which happens even to this day. Now, there is one very important institute of education in the country which was established in Delhi University, and this was known as the Central Institute of Education, as independent kind of institution which was established at that time, and then later it became a Department of Education of Delhi University. Now this was to establish, in Dr. Azad's words, a research center for solving new educational problems of the country. This is what is said when the Institute of Education was established. And in 1951, under his leadership, the first ever Indian Institute of Technology was established in 1951, the Kharupetia. The first one which came up was in 1951. And many people do not know that the Indian Institute of Science, which already had been functioning in Bangalore, the development of that was taken up as the first kind of a challenge by Dr. Azad, Maulana Azad, and then he helped the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore to prosper with that. But one of the most important things, in spite of the fact that the UGC was there, the Institute of Education came up, colleges, universities were there, the passion of Maulana Azad was always in primary education. Now this is something which is very, very crucial for India, and I will allude to that later as I come in. And let me quote what he had said about this, about primary education. He said that we must not for a moment forget it is the birthright of every individual to receive at least the basic education, without which he cannot fully discharge his duties as a citizen. That's what he had said when it comes to primary schooling. Now, Azad also was criticized, as I said, while he was doing all these things in India, he was also criticized, and one of the things which they did was that the advocates of Pakistan, in fact, went to the extent of condemning him. Now this was painful, but he took it in his stride. Now, this is one part of it. I'm sticking only to two things here. One is about Dr. Maulana Azad. The other thing I will talk about India's educational things, because we are on National Education Day. I will not touch on anything else, even tangentially, but I will concentrate on these things. Now, the differences, this is something very important, because today, whoever the leader is or whoever was sometime back, they don't encourage any kind of criticism. Nehru was instrumental in making Maulana Azad the education minister, natural resources, scientific research, everything. But there were differences at times, and at one point, Maulana Azad was unhappy about what Nehru was doing. Nehru, being the Prime Minister, was the leader, or the rahbar, as they say in Urdu, of India. But then in Parliament, it's recorded at one point, Maulana Azad, when he was unhappy with Nehru, there is a Urdu couplet which I will read out. And this couplet is something which many people have used in different kinds of contexts and also in Parliament. And this is a couplet or sher, as you say in Urdu, is from Shahab Jafri. And Shahab Jafri's, which I like, the sher is something which I always keep talking about whenever I have an opportunity. And the sher goes like this in Urdu. तू इधर उधर की न बात कर, ये बता कि काफिला क्यों लुटा, मुझे रह जन्नों से गिला नहीं, तेरी रहबरी का सवाल है. I will read it out again for those who are not familiar with this. तू इधर उधर की न बात कर, ये बता कि काफिला क्यों लुटा, मुझे रह जन्नों से गिला नहीं, तेरी रहबरी का सवाल है. Now, to put it in English, the translation could be that we are not worried about the character of passerbys, or rather it is your leadership which is important to me. He says that Rahazano could be wayfarers and people who sometimes attack the caravans which go. He says, I am not bothered about who attacked the caravan. I am not bothered about who did something wrong to the qafila. For me, what is important is the rahbar, the leader. So, it's the rahbari ka sawal hai. That's what he was interested in. And he openly said this to Nehru in the Indian Parliament. Now, Nehru was quite amused because he could take a lot of criticism. Lots of chief ministers, governors used to write to him And in fact, he has recorded those are available in some of his writings. He took a lot of criticism, but then he was magnanimous. He didn't have, like today's leaders, megalomaniac tendencies. Though he could justifiably be a megalomaniac, he was not a megalomaniac. He could take criticism and then be happy about it by giving his own kind of a thing. Today you cannot imagine anybody talking about or making such a complaint against any leader today and openly in parliament where you say that I don't think many people would do that today. Now these are certain things which are important from the point of view of what Dr. Maulana Azad did and the contributions. Now, taking up things from his passion for primary schooling, there are certain things which I quite like to highlight. Now, in India, there is a lot of things which people talk about merit. To me, merit is a myth. Merit is a myth because people who argue against reservations are the ones who always talk about reservations in jobs, educational institutions, or anywhere for that matter, where the government of India policy has been there, where reservations are constitutionally guaranteed. Now the people who are against reservations, I am very passionate about reservations. I think reservations should continue, and I will give the justification reasons as to why they should continue. But then people who criticize reservations have come out or keep coming out by saying that merit is not recognized. Merit is the thing which is important, and therefore reservation should not be there, and merit can take care of it. And that's a myth. And the myth is, let me start off with a personal kind of example. If my daughter or the children of any of these people, including my good friend Alok, are doing well, they're doing well not because they're born intelligent. They're doing well because they had the privilege of the class background of having born in these kind of families. And that's the reason they're doing well. And that's something I think most of us should recognize. You send them to private schools, you have lot of contacts, and there are a lot of uncles and aunts in good positions, okay, and they go to contact classes, they go to coaching classes, and they pass an entrance examination. And that you talk about as merit. And that's where my whole passion about primary education and its importance comes in, because if the state, whether the government of India, government of Assam, or government of Tamil Nadu, government of Telangana, the places which we frequent, have to do something, they haven't done it. They have abdicated the responsibility towards primary education. Any country that does not provide equality and a level playing field for everybody, primary education is failing in its duty. And that's exactly what's happening in India. And that's the reason why people coming from rural areas, less privileged families, from scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and minorities, they're not doing well in this education on higher levels because they have not been provided the kind of platform which is necessary for them to go up. First, you don't provide the platform, and then you talk about merit, and you talk about merit because merit helps your own children to gather and get certain positions which are there. That's where the problem comes in. So merit is, in one word, one sentence, class privilege. Your class, your background, and the family and the society that you come from is privileging you and giving you certain benefits and putting you on a kind of a pedestal or a platform. And therefore, you talk about that as merit, so that a whole lot of people do not compete even if they're doing well. And certain governments today, like Tamil Nadu for instance, they're against the NEET in medical and against JEE in engineering kind of a thing. And I feel they have quite a lot of justification for doing that. There are girls and boys in Tamil Nadu or Telangana or even Assam for that matter, who may get 90-95% in their school examination, or even 99%, some of them have gotten in that examination, but they cannot compete in NEET because NEET is dominated by people who come from middle class families, where the parents have sent them to private schools and where the parents are sending the coaching classes and they're sending them to counseling and other kinds of things which are happening, and they're exposing them. And the people who sit in the interviews, if there is an interview, also prefer the kind of people who come from their kind of background. And that's the kind of myth which is being built in India around myth. Most countries will not have this kind of a problem, and no country has progressed unless it has had a very strong kind of investment in primary schooling. And what is India's investment in primary schooling? Compare that with the myth of another myth of defense. Is nothing. It's meaningless. It's less than peanuts, or worse than peanuts. And therefore, this is the problem which is there. If you want any society to do away with reservation, any state in India to do away with reservation, the central government to do away with reservation, you need to provide certain basic kind of things, and which the state has not been doing. Now the caste censuses which are coming up in Bihar, for instance, has exposed a whole lot of things. You had a certain basket which was there for them, 50%, 60% or something. Now you find that there are about 75 to 80% of the people who are less privileged. Therefore, this is another important thing which is going to heat up. And in some weak moment, Amit Shah confessed that caste census is important. But otherwise, the main leader says that we can't have caste census, there is no need to have caste census in India. Caste census will expose a whole lot of things if it is done properly. It exposes the problems which are there for the scheduled caste, it exposes the problems which are there for minorities, it exposes what's there for scheduled tribe, and it exposes everything where less privileged people are not getting the kind of importance which is there for them. So therefore, this whole question of merit is something which we need to look at in a completely different kind of a thing. Now, education in India not being a level playing field, the state cannot abdicate this responsibility. And this is something which is very important. And the clamor for private schooling is there. You go to any person, for instance, the people who work for you, either the domestic people or the people who iron your clothes or wash your clothes or something. What's their aspiration? The aspiration of them for their children is send them to an English medium school. And this is something I think which is emerging as an important kind of thing. Has already been there for a long time, and this is something because at some point they will be able to compete with the more privileged people if they have certain kind of a platform like a good proper private education which is possible for them. Now 2 points. One is, this is something which again I have been very worried about. If there are no reservations, you know what it leads to? Not having reservations in India is a kind of reservation. So if you don't have reservation, there are certain privileged groups of people which will get the benefits. Therefore, no reservation means a basic sort of reservation for certain groups which have been enjoying it for a very long time. Now the last point that I would like to make is that no country can progress primary education, I have touched on that, if they don't do another thing besides primary education, and that's primary health. And primary health is again something which the state has abdicated, and therefore there will be diseases because primary health care is not taken care of. And a simple thing like providing drinking water 24 hours a day in any house, 80% of the communicable diseases will come down. If you don't arrest that, there will be diseases, and therefore what the private sector is doing, like the private sector is doing in education, the private sector has jumped into health also. And you go to Apollo, which started as a small hospital in Madras, now it is expanded everywhere. Okay. Now the private sector has been encouraged by the state, like private education has been encouraged by the state by abdicating its responsibility. You are not taking up your responsibility, therefore somebody else has to do it. But for the next 50 years or even more in India, 2 things which will remain crucial and important are primary education and primary health. If the state is not providing this, then it's failing. And therefore this is very well reflected and easily can be seen from the fact that there's very little allocation for both these sectors. And I don't think any country in the world gives so less to these places as India. And India being a very diverse kind of a country, catering to different groups of people and different levels of socio-cultural integration is an important kind of a thing. And therefore, I will end my monologue by doing this. But then there is one thing. Maybe there are, according to the rules of the keynote address and other things, people say that you cannot ask questions. But I personally, wherever I have gone, I have relaxed this rule and made people to ask me questions if there is time and if the organizers are willing. Therefore, I will be failing in my duty if I don't offer you the chance to question me, and going by a monologue is not the right thing to do. So I know that many places where I give keynote addresses or at the chief guest, they say no questions for that. But then I relax that rule. In case somebody has got a very, very obsessive kind of a reason for asking a question, or even if it's not obsessive kind of a thing, I am open to that. But I leave it to the organizers to do that. Shukriya, I am sorry to keep you away from your food. Okay, but please visualize, sometimes visualizing something and virtual things, because the virtual things are becoming very important. Virtual food is also important in certain contexts. Thank you very much for being a very patient audience.